They're spaced? Oh, I see.
You usually sit all
Next to each other.
now they're every other way. And it's
They're two aisles, the two
Yeah.
rows now.
so
Okay.
like this now, staff is called.
Next to each other.
Now they're every other way. And it's
They're two aisles, the two
Yeah.
rows now.
It's an echo.
you like that's a really delayed echo.
Yeah, that's a delayed thing.
Your worship, how are you?
That's just to make sure.
That's our marker to make sure we stand enough apart when we share the podium.
Oh, you want to share?
Yes.
Yes.
We have to be distanced from each
Two.
Oh, man, it's,
New world.
well, it's just the new abnormal, as I
Yes.
call it. The new abnormal. It's going to be this way for quite a while.
Oh, indeed. It's not
I
going
look
to
at
be
this year
anytime
as kind
soon.
of like it's a weird gap year where we
Yeah.
all just kind of, nothing is normal.
I have to, well, yeah, but then you have to begin looking at the positive side. So I think what it did is it forced the entire world to pause and just stop for a moment.
Yeah.
And go, wait. I think it's resituating people around their families and more around spending time together as opposed to having to go to 16
Worrying
different things.
about each other.
Yeah. I think it really, really has.
It really brought to light some issues like the nursing home issues.
Nursing
and
home,
the
poverty.
care and the poverty, and people that are on the street are so obvious now, and nobody else out there.
Right? Yeah. And even just a baseline, you can come up with like a baseline, like a salary or an income for poverty. It's like everyone gets this much. Just set them right
The
away.
environmental issues, and all that stuff cleaned up because there's nothing happening.
Exactly.
That doesn't mean you keep it that way, because the world's shut down too, right?
Yeah.
But also the inequity with like, who's got really good IT at home
Mhm.
and who doesn't.
And who does not?
And especially the library.
Technology.
Closed for a while there. Yeah.
You know, rural high speed
Yeah.
broadband and stuff.
Big. It did also shine a positive light, I think, on the Maritimes.
Mhm.
Yeah. I think a lot more people were like, hang on a second. Yeah. Maybe this life in Calgary is not what I thought it should
I don't
be.
know, the real estate people are realizing there's a lot of people
There-
coming back. There's a lot of,
It's
we don't want, we want all this traffic. We want people to retire back here, we want people to want to stay here.
right.
But they're saying that they're finding a lot of young, or not young, people who are retired, they
Right.
can finish their career.
Yeah.
They can do some culture.
Yeah.
But they're finding a lot of people in their 50s want to come back here now.
To continue work remotely.
Right.
Remotely or type of job where they can transfer to a job where they can change offices and they
Right.
want to be back here because it's the lifestyle is safe. You know.
Exactly. The bubble, the whole 9 yards. Yeah. I had a friend who sold her house, and she said it didn't even last very long, and there was a bidding war.
Oh, it's crazy. Pam Doe, who's a friend of mine. Pam, when was it? Over the July 1st long weekend. It was in the middle of it, I guess. Ann and I were down to St. Anne's for a couple of days. She has a home down there. We went over and watched that day over there. She said in March and April, and part of May, she had 40 closes for this house.
Yes. It's
40. I said, I can't keep it. She said, it's not that I'm a superstar, it's just that they're like crazy.
Yeah.
Somebody told me yesterday, they asked a friend of theirs, listen to this. 7 offers.
Yeah.
They took 3,000 over the rest.
Yep.
And they took no condition. Great spot. So, yeah.
I feel
Well, that's
bad,
something forever, but there's a big one.
right? I feel bad for the bigger cities
Oh, yeah.
like Toronto, Calgary, Vancouver. They're all going to suffer because of the out migration of everybody going, well, I can now stay at home. Why do I commute an hour and a half to work every day if I can do it once a week, maybe kind of thing? So that's really going to impact the downtown core. And I bet that they have to have that just starts to get prices are out of the,
My, one of my daughters, they, bought a, you go past the road that goes out to Scottsdale. But they're in diagonally, like there's 3, 4, 5 houses up there. They're like it all.
all behind it.
They want to build. They were going to sell their house. They have a nice house on the one before. But cost of building the same token, they realized they could probably sell their house for about 30 or 40 grand. So now they want to do this, they said, "Hey, we should sell our house, live in a trailer.
Yeah.
Winterize it." They got 2 weeks.
Oh.
They have a trailer, but it's not winterized.
Oh.
Their in-law has a cottage.
Is it winterized?
Well,
Ish?
ish.
No?
Oh, no,
Okay.
Lake George. So we can bundle all that. Sounds pretty romantic.
Yeah.
The 7th of January.
And with the teenagers.
But yeah, the dilemma was don't build because housing materials, housing prices.
We need to find, yeah, and even the housing
Well,
materials. Yeah.
of course, they're looking at us. We have 3-bedroom apartments at the end of the night. Figure a couple of them.
No, not moving in, yeah.
Couple of them.
No, that's it.
I love it.
Yeah, exactly.
How long is your presentation?
Half an hour
Far in.
at best. That might be pretty short. So, yeah, depends on, yeah, 5 recommendations. But we hope so. But if you do a good enough job explaining the reasons behind everything, then it should be short.
It's your clientele that might not understand.
Keep them all.
That's the issue.
So here's the thing. It's that strategic, what do we call that?
Always
Yeah.
a.
Imagine.
Yeah.
I'll take the boot out for cover.
Allergy. No, I'm not a bother.
I don't know if it's an age thing or a language thing. I don't know many of them. But that's the thing, I'm not sure if it's an age or probably a bit of both. Yeah, like that's the thing. I know
Yeah.
like
The actual month of show, yeah.
got a really good laugh with the one breaks. Dude, you see a couple of old guys, that could be a lot of campers. I can say that.
Might be a hard time picking.
There's only 2 then, that's the issue.
Put on the table if you want.
On it.
Huh? Looks like it.
Bye. That was loud. I'm so sorry, everyone.
Bye.
Counselor? No.
It's a Dollarama thing I sewed on.
That's great. I have one that has a beer on it. I thought that was the benefit.
I looked
Do you want one with beer on?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, see, that's,
Beer mug.
I just want my face. So people know who I am. Hello, my name is John.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, no, that's great.
do like these, got these like pear things, so you
Yeah.
can see your whole mouth. It's good.
Or you could like get an etching of your word.
Yeah, put some.
Yeah, I don't
City crest.
I miss Bruce not being here.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we'll call the meeting to order. Before we commence, this being a public meeting, everybody that's watching remotely, counselors should have their camera on so the public can see you and we can see you, but mute your mic if you're at home, but unless you want to speak, but please put your camera on. And is this meeting one where we have to confirm they're by themselves?
It's probably me.
Somebody's playing with their microphone, okay. And although it's just a presentation, does anybody have a conflict on this issue tonight? I assume not. Okay, so we will begin, and we are going to have the presentation on the, I don't have the formal agenda in front of me. The name of the project is called City Clerk?
It's proposed on standing committees.
Just the proposal on standing committees, all right. And we have, I assume maybe City Clerk, you would like to kick this off and we'll get going.
Yeah, this is just a continuation. We had, council had asked that we move it forward to another meeting. So Michelle and Janice are going to present tonight on standing committees. As council might remember, this came out of changes that we thought during the time that we were of COVID, we could take a look at what was working, what wasn't working. And so it was referred to the governance committee. The governance committee had Janice and Michelle interview all of council, and they also met with senior staff to find out, what council's feedback was with respect to standing committees and what was working and what wasn't working. And Michelle and Janice are here to bring back that information and what they heard.
Good, thank you. Ladies?
Thank you very much. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
So, can they see the, okay, perfect. There we are. So this is the proposed future of standing committees. So based on a resolution for the city clerk's office to come back with looking at possible solutions to standing committees, looking at the alignment, structure, timing, and number of meetings. We will say that this was a result of a presentation done to council on COVID updates that was done regularly throughout this past several months. And as a result of that, this corporation is now looking inward to see what else we can continue practices and improving from things that we've changed and adjusted during the actual COVID time. We will mention the fact that we're talking about standing committees only during this meeting. Advisory and ad hoc committees are outside of the scope of the project of the research that we completed.
Okay, so Michelle and I are going to tag team. The resolution was on May 11th, and on May 14th, you'll note, just a few days later, we started interviewing councillors to hear your thoughts on standing committees. We had a game plan. We talked about the purpose of standing committees, council, the role of the chair and vice chair, what was working well and what was not working so well, and what changes all of you would like to see. And we noted everything.
So we'll go through and give you a highlight of what Janice and I heard during our conversations with council members. So what we heard is the purpose of standing committees. We asked them what do they believe the purpose of the standing committees are, and they are to set up and receive debate reports, exchange ideas, recommend solutions on matters that relate to management and governance of the city, and to provide direction to city staff. It's a first level to council or an entrance point to council, an opportunity for public and interest groups to present to council. They translate community values into policy. They enable the spreading of the workload amongst the councillors and committees. And as well, it's a great opportunity for our staff to be exposed to the workings of governance and providing presentation and reports to the council.
So what we heard about the role of the chair, and this is as it is now and what it could be, to lead and guide the committee through agendas, follow through on issues raised, and to manage the meetings, making them fair and timely. Work with staff to bring forward pertinent items for an appropriate agenda. Upon appointment, establish priorities from council priorities and focus on them through their term, and provide leadership representing the community, maintain control of conversations, maintain decorum during the meetings, and act as a spokesperson as appropriate. So this is what we heard, was that this was a highly responsible position, and that everyone wanted to optimize the team that they had for each one of their standing committees.
So then we asked, what is the role of vice chair? And what we heard was quite a varied mixed responses. So what we heard was the chair's right-hand person. We heard that they share the workload with the chair. The vice chair could potentially be a chair in training. They also mentioned it was an excellent opportunity for new councillors to get exposed to how governance works. As well as some said there's actually no role for the chair. And in the chair's absence, they would assume all duties and continue the meetings going forward. So it was quite a mixed conversation we had for the vice chair role.
Then you gave us what you thought was working well, informal nature of standing committees. It was very easy to have these committee meetings. They allowed for debate and vetting of ideas and issues. They enabled a better and effective use of time at council and committee and formal council, city council meetings. So this was, this helped take the workload from council meetings. It helps in balancing the aspects of council's ward issues, wants and needs in relation to the interdependence of all other wants and the city on a holistic level.
Then we asked the question, what's not working so well? Adam? Thank you. So what we heard is that there's often too many agenda items on the meetings, and there's no predictability of how long an agenda item might take, debating on the amount of conversations or debates that occur. Therefore, oftentimes it doesn't fit in the allocated hour of the actual meetings. There is a perceived lack of understanding of the roles, responsibilities, and duties of each committee. We heard that there was a little bit of confusion, as well as the understanding of the process and capacity of how to ask for staff reports and how staff follow up on those reports, as well as a lack of trust of standing committees. So this was not so much the word, it's how do things funnel from the council to the standing committees and from the standing committees back up to council. There seemed to be a lack of understanding, a full understanding of how it worked. Debates, decorum during debates, and participation is different. We heard that some feel that committees are not equally, not created as equal. And that was the perceived, that's what they thought. That's what we heard. Yeah, click it.
Okay. So not so well. This is page 9 now. Next page. Oh. Who's been
There you
changing?
go.
Okay, there we go. Okay. So that was just one moment in time. And I'm sure there are other ideas even today you could add to it. So this is what we heard. What changes would you like to see? So meetings would remain on schedule. If the chair is absent, then the vice chair should chair the meeting. The agendas of the standing committees should be optimized. A combination of the standing committee chair and the staff working together to make sure that they have a really good agenda. Each standing committee must be more strategic in developing ideas and directions that work toward fulfilling the municipal plan. So you want to be extremely strategic when you have these meetings. And you want to be accountable. You want a way to evaluate and monitor the committee's progress. So what we heard is that you would like something that's outward looking, pretty agile, provide value to the public, and very accountable.
Other things you would like to see changed is the alignment felt a little off in a few of the services and in a few of the presentations. The committees need an update, that the clarity of their roles and responsibilities and mandates are aligned with your programs and services. They would like to see environmental stewardship as a standalone. We also heard that every councillor be a part of each committee with a right to vote. So there again, we heard a lot of mixed suggestions of what you would like to improve. Although overall, the feedback was very positive on how the standing committees work in our city. Overall, the councillors seem to believe that it's of great value.
So now I'm going to summarize what we heard. They wanted clarity of the roles of the chair and the vice chair. And that's more like a really strong term of reference. Everyone has a certain role, what the mandate of the committee is. They wanted clarity to create a greater understanding of the purpose of the standing committee. That would be the mandate, process of the standing committee, how it works. So again, like Michelle said, how does things get funneled from the standing committee to council? And if there's anything from council that wants to be funneled back to the standing committee, how does that work? So there was a lot of documentation that was required. We heard that training. Everyone wants to do a very good job as a councillor in representing their ward. It starts with, because the roles of a chair are very important, it starts with very good training on how to be an extremely good chair. And everyone that is attending the committee meetings also has to be trained on what is expected from them as well. The standing committee need to be lined up. We heard over and over again the word alignment. And it would make sense to line up the programs a little bit better. The agendas, who sets the agenda for council, for standing committees? That was a really hot topic. And In the end, what you're looking for is something that's a really good, strong agenda, and the chair really wants to be highly involved in that. And priorities, who sets them? Council sets them, but the standing committees sets the standing committee priorities based on the municipal plan. And you guys want easier KPIs. How do you know if you have done this well? You wanted improvements, reporting back mechanism. The standing committee should report back to council to keep everyone informed.
Okay, so we're going to take just a quick go to the PDF. So included in your package, you received a PDF, which I will apologize, it is extremely small, but you can zoom in on it to have a look at it. So just a bit of an explanation is what Janice and I did as part of our designing the orientation for the council, the new council coming in May. We began to look at making a one sheet that summarizes all of the items that we're talking about. So if you look at the sheet and you bring it up at the very top is the new proposed name, and we'll go through those for each of the committees. And the names are now, the proposed new names are basically the program names. Underneath it, you'll see the former name that it was referred to as it is today. Next to it, underneath that, is the programs. So what programs actually were responsible to that standing committee? Underneath that was just an explanation of our proposed suggestion of meeting times, and we'll get to those recommendations and suggestions. Council members, again, we'll get to that recommendation as we go through, based on what A19 says today. Then underneath it is the actual definition of the request for results. So that was the document that Amy sent out earlier today. That longer document, this is summarized. This is what that goal statement is for that program. Underneath that, you'll see all the services that are listed to that standing committee. And at the very bottom, which we are working on updating as we're going forward, are the guiding plans and documents that speak to each of those standing committees. Okay. So now are the proposed changes based on what we heard on the surveys from the interviews and the discussions. So the first one is we have a strategic and external relations standing committee. Will be renamed to the Governance and Civic Engagement Standing Committee with a newly defined mandate. The proposal for this is for such situations like this change, it would enable council to get together quarterly. They would only meet 4 times a year or as needed. And they would discuss the council priorities. That's where we could touch base, where you could get together and touch base and discuss the priorities, suggested changes, ideas. It would be the shoot of where the governance committee, currently that Chris co-chairs with the councillor, they would do the work and ask the staff to maintain it's going, but then they would feed it back up to this newly named Governance and Civic Engagement Committee. The committee would also then look at your priorities 4 times a year, go in and have, and it would also be the platform for them to check in with the standing committees and what the standing committees are working on. So the proposed change is that that would then change into this. It would still deal with the governance, with the internal affairs. I'm not sure I have that name right. Intergovernmental affairs. But it would more be a place where council could get together and have discussions such as this. This proposal would go back to that committee. They would have the discussion. It is consisting of all 13 members of council.
Okay. Thank you for changing things for me. Back to what Michelle was saying, this is your continuous improvement committee. Looking at yourself as you govern, and it's your continuous improvement committee. That's how I see it. Two, you wanted meaningful names. The committee names have been changed to reflect the program result areas and the language found in the municipal plan. We have a municipal plan now. It's just been updated, and we have an election coming. So this is a great time to be looking at the alignment. And, we heard there were some gray areas and there was a lot of duplication. So we listened to you to hear what you were saying about the alignment and came up with the committee names. So we heard that you craved a structure, proper alignment for council, for staff, for the public, and for the candidates that were going to be soon in the next municipal election.
Okay, here, this is the change as to what currently exists in the A19 bylaw. Currently, the appointment is of a chair, a vice chair, and at least 2 minimum members of council. We're proposing we change that to a minimum of 6 councillors be appointed to each standing committee. And currently the quorum is the chair or vice chair plus 2 members to make a quorum in any of the standing committees. And we're proposing, based on what we heard, is the quorum be moved to 4. So that would be the chair or vice chair plus 3 members to make the quorum, as opposed to what's currently in A19. We did do a statistical review, was done to ensure that the changes would not add any extra time to councillors. It would mean you would be required to sit on a minimum of 3 committees. Okay. And we did do some statistics, which you can see here. We based on, there was a total of 50 standing committee meetings in 2019. 82% of the meetings had 6 or more councillors present. You'll see the average was 7 to 8 for each of the committees.
So before you became a councillor, were you aware what the schedule was for each of the standing committees? Were you surprised when you became a councillor that there was sometimes it was on Tuesdays, sometimes it was on Wednesdays, sometimes on Thursday, and there were special meetings, so you couldn't really plan ahead. So what we heard was that you wanted something that you could count on, that was easy to remember. And it's also good for the public if they can count on certain things happening at a certain time. So all standing committee meetings will occur on Wednesdays, and the 4th Thursday of the month will be held and reserved for those occasions when a standing committee needs additional meeting time to go through its agenda. We heard that sometimes you can't do the entire thing in one meeting, so you needed that spare date. In order to have it scheduled helps with the city clerk booking meeting rooms, and also for the public to know that something is coming. There's a lot of communications that happens. So anyway, this was all a good way to standardize things, which is what we heard from you.
Okay, if approved, we are proposing that the changes be made to bylaw A19 on January 1st, 2021. And the A19 overall would include the changes that are required based on the adoption of the code of conduct as well. It would be done in one presentation and one change. With the exception of the governance and civic engagement committee, we are feeling that we're proposing that it begin in the fall. It's an excellent time to begin to define your mandate as well as we move into the budget season. Going forward, it was a concept that we thought we would pitch as to beginning that one in the fall. So to summarize, I know it's a massive spreadsheet and you can't read it, but you do get the PDF of it. Chris can attest to, he gets a lot of these. Essentially is what we're doing is we're changing the names of the actual standing committees, maintaining the same number of standing committees at this point in time. The names will be changed to reflect what their actual program title is. We've incorporated the new municipal plan program goals under each one. So each standing committee is now aligned with a program goal based on the municipal plan as well. We were requesting that we go from currently you have a chair and a vice chair and 2 members appointed. You would now have a chair, a vice chair, and 4 members appointed to each of them who would be voting members. A quorum from the original 3 to 4, as well as we're not limiting, anyone can sit on any number of them, but we're saying a minimum of those, which again equates to approximately 3 committees per councillor. Proposing to do them every Wednesday. That way the schedule would be set at the beginning of the year and you would know what Wednesday you would be, and reserving the 4th Thursday of the month in case things go over. Allowing that, we heard some people feel it's difficult when individuals have other items they need to be at when it goes beyond the hour. Some people have to leave and miss part of it. It would allow them to then postpone those items to that 4th Thursday, which you could block your calendar in advance. Okay. I'm sure I left things out, but any questions?
Michelle, before we get to questions, just for the public that may be watching later on or whatever, in what capacity. Could you read out just the names, proposed names of the new committees, and maybe just the general purpose?
Okay.
Just the high level one?
So the first one used to be formerly the Development Committee. It's now Economic Vitality. I may stumble over words. These are talking with, connecting those with our community goals under the municipal plan. That would be a strong and diverse economy, complete neighborhood and distinctive places, vibrant downtown and riverfront. The livable community services would now become livable community. That would include welcoming and supportive, culturally rich and diverse. Public safety and environment at this point in time would remain the same. At this point, we believe that as we build our platform with the new adoption of our environmental initiatives, it will eventually be able to stand on its own. But what we're prescribing is that public safety would be set schedule and environment would be a different set schedule, but within that one standing committee. And that is talking about, which by the way, those are backwards. We'll admit our mistakes. Public safety is not green and healthy. Environmental stewardship is safe and inviting public realm. Anyway, mobility, transportation would then move to be mobility, and that is the complete transportation system. Of course, your strategic and external relations would then become the governance and civic engagement. So those are, you're talking about all the community goals under that one. And then I'm sorry, Adam, I skipped over the first one, which is of course, finance and administration. And we're not completely married to this name, corporate and sustainable infrastructure. And that's where we talk about corporate efficiency and sustainable infrastructure. Okay.
Thank you very much. Chris McPherson.
Thank you, Worship. On behalf of Councillor McDermott, myself, I just like to thank Jennifer Murray for leading our subcommittee on the standing committees, and thank Janice and Michelle for all the work that they've been doing on this. I should mention that Michelle is celebrating her birthday with us tonight. What a great way to celebrate your birthday, Michelle. I did want to mention the reason that this presentation is here is from a presentation that was made about a month ago with the admin report. Council wanted more rationale and more discussion around what staff heard. And so, because it's a big issue, standing committees, in my time, and council's taken quite a few tries at trying to adjust them, and they're always very difficult because it's near and dear to everyone's heart, and it is what the public sees. So it is important that we take the necessary time to get this right, because it is hard to go back and redo it again. So what you heard from Janice and Michelle this evening is the rationale for the admin report that was brought forth. And we also wanted to, I guess, give back what we thought we heard from you. So I guess now, Your Worship, it's time to hear from council.
It is. Thank you, Chris. And we'll begin with, there's a couple of remote hands up. Councillor Erickson.
Thank you, Worship. Thank you very much to the presenters tonight. I appreciate that a lot of hard work's gone into this project. And it's certainly well-intentioned, and hopefully at the other end of our process, we will have a better standing committee system for it. I'm a little disappointed that the comments from council based on their interviews weren't put through some kind of descriptive statistical lens so that we knew how many people felt in a particular way. That's kind of like the minimum thing I was looking for there. I didn't really want a laundry list or a menu of all the creative suggestions and problems people have. I was more interested in how many councillors felt a certain way, because that would give me a better idea of understanding the will of council in a certain matter. And we're certainly not going to put every one of those items to a vote or a show of hands just so we can figure it out now. Nonetheless, it's also a little disappointing that all of the other council committee activities that we sit on in terms of ad hoc committees weren't considered part of the scope, because they are no less important, even though some of them don't consume the same amount of resources of the city as a whole. I think it would have been a better project and we'd have a better result if we had considered all those items in scope, because they do create conflicts between each other. Anyway, too late for that one. I want to go through the proposed changes because I don't anticipate being able to have ton of time on this topic. I'm fine with the first proposed change, making the Strategic External Relations Standing Committee now the Governance and Civic Engagement Standing Committee. I find that does better reflect its mandate. I'm not entirely sure that it only meeting 4 times a year would be sufficient, but like any of our standing committees, extra meetings can be called, so I'm sure that will happen and we can adjust if need be. With regard to the proposed name changes for the committees, I have a fundamental problem with naming them after the results areas, because the results areas are a smaller conceptual basket than the committee's potential. So otherwise put, our program results areas are basically the KPIs based on our current programs and our current understanding of the programs, but the future holds all kinds of wonderful possibilities. And I think naming something after, that's so retroactively looking, it limits them too much, and tying them too tightly to the results area limits them too much. For example, if we were really tightly married to a bunch of the concepts in mobility, we wouldn't have been able to deal with the idea of Uber or any of those things. So I like to see our standing committees have a mandate that makes engaging the future a little easier. And the language in the municipal plan is general like that. But in some parts of the municipal plan, it's too specific, for example, or problematic. And I appreciate when Michelle said she wasn't married to the name proposed for the Finance and Administration Committee, because so far every single person I've put that name to hasn't been able to identify what that committee would do if it was all of a sudden called, and where is it again? The Corporate and Sustainable Infrastructure Committee. That's great for experts and people that have worked in municipal government, but your person on the street who we need to engage in this process in an important way, I just wouldn't understand what we meant by that. I suggested the last time I talked to Michelle that we call it the Municipal Finance and Corporate Administration Committee. That does actually reflect more accurately, in my opinion, the mandate of the committee, the services it provides, and the rest of it. Moving quickly along, the statistical review chart that was put up, I would have been a lot happier if you had indicated which counselors in attendance were actually members of that committee and which ones were there attending for other reasons and non-voting. That would give you a better idea of the ability of voting members or name committee members to attend to those things. And also it would have been important, in my opinion, to highlight how much work counselors are doing on other committees and in other areas of their council behavior. Nonetheless, I do think that a minimum of 6 counselors appointed to a standing committee is a good idea. I think our standing committees currently have more than that already, so I think that's we're living that part already. When that proposed change was presented, I heard staff say with a quorum of 4, chair and vice chair included. I think that could be a problem. I like the idea of a quorum of 4 if there's going to be at least 6 there every meeting. But I don't think you can say chair and vice chair. Obviously, you need the chair, and the vice chair can fill that role. But I think the vice chair doesn't need to be there if there's enough counselors there for a quorum. I think having both of those would be a bit of a redundancy. Anyway, following on proposed changes 4 and 5. I'm happy with standardization of the standing committees meeting on Wednesdays. I think that's fine. I hope that a 4th Thursday of the month will be fine for all of the standing committee overflow moments. I'm sure it'll be fine in that regard. And when it comes to proposed change number 6, I don't like the idea of doing this all in one great big omnibus bylaw change. I'd rather see it done in smaller pieces so we can debate them more appropriately when it comes to council. Anyway, those are my comments and concerns, Your Worship. Thank you very much again for everyone's work on this file.
Thank you, Councillor Erickson, for your usual thorough review. Appreciate that. Councillor Grandy was the next one to have his hand up.
Yeah, Your Worship, thanks. I'm not going to be as in-depth as my colleague. I'm basically fine with a lot of the recommendations. I'm curious, though, and first of all, thank you for all the hard work, ladies, on this, and John and Chris. This is not easy, as Chris alluded to. It's never been easy, and we've looked at this before, my time in council as well. I guess the comments in your review with councillors talking about the flow of information and direction up to council and back down from council to committees, I think is really intriguing to me, because normally you hold a committee meeting and then it's forwarded on to council, and there's no other communication that goes back and forth from the committee to council. And in my time, I've never seen council really reflect anything or deflect anything back to a committee for further study or analysis or anything else. So I was curious why that sort of wasn't addressed in here, other than this is just more of a realignment, I guess. And maybe your mandate didn't take all of that into account. And I appreciate that, but those are intriguing comments to me, because I think if you want the committees to be effective and you want them to offload some of the delegation of CIC and all of the work, and we know the CIC is always jammed and there's always a lot of things to go on there, the committees have to be given more responsibility, but come with responsibility comes accountability. And so, I was intrigued to see those words and comments, and I may have made some of those in your interviews, but I don't see them addressed here, which concerns me. I personally think public safety and environment should be split up right at the beginning. People are looking for environmental stewardship and leadership in our municipality about in the environment. And I think we should be giving it more of a focus than we do today on our programs and what we're delivering and what we communicate to our constituents on, and how our constituents, based on our, hopefully with our new interaction communications that Giselle gave to us a week ago, will provide more input and more comments back. But I think environment should be a leadership thing, and it should be one of its own on that side as well. Other than that, I mean, Greg covered a lot of different facts and different things, and I can appreciate those. I do think the laundry list on finance and administration, or whatever you want to call it, or whatever the new name will be, is massive. I don't think the ability to address all of those reporting structures and all of that information in an hour meeting with a flow over to a Thursday is going to work. I think there's things in there when you talk about infrastructure and stuff, I think some of that should have been divided up into its realms, which be transportation, community services, and other areas. But anyway, that sort of goes back to where we are today. But just a few comments on that. Other than that, it's interesting. Thank you, Worship. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Councillor Grandy. Now we have 3 questions here in the chamber, and then back to Councillor Keenan afterwards externally. So we'll start with Councillor Chase.
Thank you, Your Worship. And I'd like to thank Janice and Michelle for the work that they did, and Councillor McDermott and Councillor Peters for leading this initiative. This is an extremely important subject. You can see that the depth of interest and concern that's been expressed by colleagues. For my part, I think that the proposals are broadly very good. And I do have a few comments that I'm going to get into. I might not be quite as long as Councillor Erickson, has touched on some of them, but I do have some points I'd like to bring forward. But this is not a new discussion. I recall back in 2016, when we formed up as a new council, the mayor charged the committees with identifying priorities key performance indicators, and to try to link the, the subject matter that the committees were dealing with back to some kind of structure, municipal plan and others that had been pre-approved. And I frankly, we probably have fallen down on that somewhat. But the intent was at that time to identify priorities, keep the committee focused on priorities, bring forward subjects that address the priorities. So in that sense, I see this as an opportunity, to carry that notion forward. I frankly think our committee structure is good. I mean, I've been down to St. John with the, with our CAO to tout, the Fredericton's committee structure as a model for doing business. I think it's quite effective, but it can obviously be improved. And just to run through some of the specifics, and I'm on the, I think I'm on page 3, council interviews. I see one of the purposes of the committees that's missing, in the report is the opportunity for councilors to bring forward issues or proposals that they've heard. I mean, most of us come to the table with some, good reason as to why we, want to strengthen or improve the city of Fredericton. And we come with ideas, but there's no clear avenue to bring forward proposals as a councillor. And I think that the committees provide an opportunity to do that. And that's one of the things that I would like to see built in is the councillors, all of us have an opportunity, to input and propose the kinds of things that they would like to see discussed by committee and brought forward to council. I'll just use an example, like speeding in residential neighborhoods. It's a concern to many people. We need to have, councillors need to be able to bring forward initiatives like that for discussion to stay on top of it. I think one of the roles of the committees is to receive referrals from council. And I think the committee should perform a very clear role in the activity of the city, and that when initiatives come forward at council or council and committee, that they can be referred to the committee for discussion. I mean, this is typical in corporate governance. The committees are used for a purpose to formulate recommendations and then bring those recommendations back to, the greater body. I think that each of the committees needs a staff liaison person. In the Public Safety and Environment Committee, and I am supportive of splitting that mandate. I think the environment piece has been an add-on, but very clearly important to citizens and could form the basis of a committee. But we have used in Public Safety and Environment a staff person to act as a liaison between the committee and staff, and to ensure that matters that the committee is pursuing are brought forward and dealt with. I think it would be too much to ask the city clerk to do all of that for all of the committees. Rather, have an individual who from the subject area who's assigned to support the committee. I think that's missing from here. I would like to see that. I didn't really understand the lack of trust comment. I didn't get stuck on it, but I trust the committees. I have no problem, and I don't know where that comes from. I do like Councillor Erickson's suggestion. It would be nice to see, where what we have here is a compendium, or a distillation of the ideas that were received. I wouldn't mind seeing the perspective or the spectrum, of comments. Finally, on the names, look, I don't understand how finance and administration would get to corporate and sustainable infrastructure. Finance and administration is perfectly understandable. You know, the dealing with matters of finance and it doesn't do a lot of the administration piece. But anyway, and I did mention that environmental stewardship could well be a standalone committee, you know, given the importance of the matter. So anyway, thank you again, you know, for the effort. I would like to see another iteration. As I said at the outset, this is an extremely important subject, you know, for council. It goes beyond, you know, some of the individual subject matters that we deal with. This is really guides the way we do business. And I think it's worth taking the time, you know, to do it and get it right. Although I'm not proposing that, you know, we have any unnecessary delay. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Mallet.
Thank you, Worship. First of all, I'll admit I wasn't able to attend meet with staff to discuss those issues. It was shortly after Phillips was born, and any free time I had, I was catching up on sleep. That being said, I wasn't surprised by most of the stuff that was brought up and the things that are working well, the things that aren't. I think overall, as the city or standing committees are working quite well. There's always ways that we can tweak and make them better. I think that's what we do well as a city. I think that's why we're doing this exercise. When I went over stuff, I think just the PDF alone makes it, if I'm looking in the lens of a new counselor, getting that PDF would go a long way just to get the information of what's the role of each committee. I think some parts that were brought up, the training, I was one of the new counselor that was named chair. I was excited for it, but I remember my first meeting that the training before hanging could have been helpful. But that being said, staff was always there to help out, and it worked great. But I think the training for new chairs could go a long way. A few points that I do have questions. I know the ideal of agenda, how they come to is often brought up. Having been chair for over 4 years now, I haven't had a item put on an agenda that I didn't want it on. So I don't think that's an issue. I think staff does a lot of the heavy lifting. They're the experts, but I think at the end of the day, it's chair's responsibility to decide what they want on the agenda or not. Also, I didn't really understand that the committee should report back to council. I think everything we do kind of goes back to council, so I don't really understand what that means. And I think it's our responsibility to come to those meetings for members to be aware of what's on the agenda if we can't make them. The one thing that we might be able to change, I think as chair, we might be able to kind of send a briefing after meetings for people that might not be able to attend. I think that could go a long way without giving extra work for staff. It didn't really fall under this review, but I'm just going to throw it out there because we're all sitting here. I think it's really important that our standing committee gets webcasts. I think it's a lot of our work that we do as council goes through our standing committee. I think that needs to be webcast. I think CIC needs to be webcast so people can see all the work that we do and all the thought process that comes behind all the decisions that we make. On the points, I think I like the direction that the strategic and external would go. I'm not sure if four meetings a year would be enough. I think even the relationship with some key partners, if it still falls underneath that alone would take more. I think that could be a great committee. I mean, it was brought up by Councillor Chase that how do we bring stuff forward? I think you have two avenues. One is work with the chair that might be affected with what you want to bring up. And if it doesn't fall under any really committees, I think that's a committee that we could, every meeting have 10 minutes to bring issues that we might have in our ward. If I go down, I think the names, I actually like the new names. I think they reflect what the roles of those committees are. But I'll have to agree with Councillor Erickson that the finance one, I'd be okay if we look at other options. The minimum of counselors, I think we were already there. And it would have happened, I think, a handful of times that we didn't have 4 counselors since I started on council. Just for to know that, I believe staff could bring it up, the statistical review of staff that Councillor Erickson brought up. I believe those are just for members because I don't think we keep count of the non-members in attendance. So those numbers, I'd be guessing that it would be from council that are members of the committee.
Sorry, I'd have to double check on that. I think, in answer to your question, I think it is who was present. I don't think it was just members. I think it was number of councils present.
Because in the yearly report, we don't keep count of who's there if they're not on the committee, but that's that point. The one that caught my attention was all the meeting on Wednesdays. I understand, I mean, it might be easier. I understand for even just for staff alone, there's a lot of staff at our meeting and it could make things easier for them. I think now that we're getting used to those hybrid meetings, that could be easier. I do have concerns. One, it's just the Wednesdays, I think, and Sam's not there yet, but I believe those are the days that kids are finished school earlier in the afternoon. So if you're at a stay-at-home parent, if you work shift and you got to go pick up your kids, it might be tight. So I don't know if we decide to go one day, if it could be another day instead of Wednesdays. That's one. I do have concern that it puts constraint on being a counselor. If it happens that on your job that Wednesdays you can't make meetings, you're out of all committees. Where now you can pick and choose. You might not be able to attend finance that falls on Wednesday, but you can go attend other meetings if you're busy on those Wednesdays. So that'd be one that I'd like to review, and I'm not against it. I understand why we're looking at it, but I'm not sold that the positive outweighs the negative. So those are the points that I had, but I think overall, like I said, it's nothing major. It's tweaks. I think in the long run, we'll be better off with some of those recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Keenan is up now.
Thanks, Your Worship. Yeah, so I think most of what I was going to say was mentioned, but I'll just cover the points that I thought were worth repeating, starting with the suggestion that the environmental stewardship become its own committee. I'll basically echo what Councillor Grandy said, in that I think it's an area that's of keen interest to the community, and also one that the city needs to show leadership on. So I think we should look at separating that. I don't know if public safety, because I haven't been a member of that. I don't know if public safety on its own has enough to stand on its own. Perhaps it does, but just to comment that I think rightfully environmental stewardship needs that, even if it's the focus and the priority that we set by doing that. So that was one point. The timing of the committees, I actually, Henri brings up a great point. And, when we talk about trying to encourage others to participate on council and in municipal politics, something we would never think of, because not a lot of us have kids that are in those elementary years, but for sure, I think that's something we should look at and see if there is another day we can find. So I would echo that as well. I don't mind having them, on the same day. I think that would simplify things. I think as far as we've all chimed in on name. I'll throw out my suggestion for that, for the finance one, and maybe call it corporate resource. And we can add sustainable infrastructure or not, or just call it corporate resource. So there's another one for you to consider. I don't know if there was much else that I wanted to cover off. I thought there was one more point, but if it comes to me, I'll just send a note to Janice or Michelle as we go along. But other than that, I think it's I think it's good that we've taken a look at the committees and, I think what it says, the other names I'm fine with. I think that they're good representations of those committees. So I'll just offer that comment as well. Other than that, I don't think we're not making major changes to these. And I think in the past, if a councillor wants to get something to a committee, as a chair, I always would have put it on, and I've never had an issue as a councillor trying to get something on a committee. So I think that works pretty well now. So those would be my comments, and thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Keenan. Councillor Rogers.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. First, thank you to you both Janice and Michelle, for all of your work on this. It's always challenging meeting with councillors individually and then trying to synthesize all those comments and compile them into a document with recommendations. So I really appreciate your work on that. I have a few points. I think I'll start though with concurring with Councillor Erickson on the point that I understand that the mandate of this work was to look at the standing committees, but I feel to look at the standing committees in a vacuum sort of negates some of the other important work that's being done. And some of the recommendations that are being made about the standing committees really does implicate the work of the other committees. For instance, I chair 2 of the other committees. So I chair the Arts and Culture Advisory and now chairing affordable housing. Chairing those committees is a significant amount of work. So then to chair those, in addition to sitting on the other standing committees, which I love to do, it adds up. Like it is a lot. I think that I very much agree with us all sitting on a minimum of 3 committees and then having the option to come to all, but I don't think that we should overlook those other committees, some of which, depending on the time of year, depending on how high the profile is in the community, sometimes those committees are a significant amount of work. They report through 2 standing committees, and but they have a lot of their own standalone work that they're doing on a regular basis, often with members in the community that are harder to, it takes more effort to get those people together. There isn't the same level of staff support when you're chairing those committees. So I think to look at just the standing committees and to overlook the work that's being done by all of us. I think when I look around, I think we all in one way or another serve on other committees in varying roles. And to separate the efforts of the 2, I think is a little bit short-sighted. While at the same time, like I said, I appreciate that that wasn't the mandate of this work. I really think that this work would have been more meaningful had we looked at all of those committees at once. We have the advisory committees, we have these ad hoc committees that get struck, we have the standing. They all influence the other, they all report through each other. And I think it would have been, we've been talking, I think since I've been on council, about the importance of looking at all those committees. And I think that this would have been a good time to have done that. So I make that point. The next point that I'll make is something that Councillor Chase alluded to when he was talking about when we, in 2016, I know I chaired strategic and external relations at that time, and we put a lot of effort into the strategic part of it, doing a strategic vision, making sure that the committee work aligned with the strategic vision. And we were doing that, but then it sort of fell aside because that is, again, a committee with, to me, 2 very dual purposes, one being the strategic work, the strategic governance work, the other being the external relations, the work with sort of a government stakeholder or a government relation type of work. So I'm glad that, and I think one gets ignored for the other depending on what's happening at the time. We've had 2 elections. We've had, since 2016. So I understand how it happens, but it's an example of why that work should be separated. I like the fact that it's become governance and civic engagement. I think that those efforts align really neatly, but to me, the government relations part, everybody, it's interesting. That's the part that all of the councillors seem most interested in anyways. I think there are some of us who are wonks and like that governance, strategic, all that kind of stuff. But I think all of council is interested in more the GRA. And so I see that as being almost a council and committee type of effort. So they were 2 points. The other thing I wanted to point out, I don't have an issue with public safety and environment being together. I don't know that I think environment should be a standing committee on its own. I think environment might be a committee that's very well suited to being an advisory committee, mainly because of the work that's done in the community. A lot of the environmental work that's done is done by our community stakeholders, similarly to arts and culture, similarly to affordable housing. They're all very, very important societal issues, but we have very knowledgeable community players who I think could be more actively engaged. So I wonder if it might be thinking of it that way. And like I say, it's certainly not to diminish the importance of the environmental stuff. It's just, how do we best strike that committee? Is it a committee that's best struck with councillors, or is it a committee that's best struck with community involvement? As far as the names go, I agree. I find the finance name a little bit challenging, but I really love economic vitality. I love what that says. To me, development never captured everything that committee was. So I really love economic vitality. And similarly, livable community. Community services makes it sound like we're only engaged in the community at the service level, when in fact, as councillors, we're involved in the community much more actively. So I like the livable community. Also, the meeting days, I like it being the same day. Had Henri not mentioned it, I was going to, for a parent, Wednesdays is the worst day to have a meeting. But for people who have jobs, particularly like mine, that has a lot of volunteers where all of my work meetings are also at lunch, having one standing day for council meetings would be helpful, but that maybe is selfish, but I do like that same day. And I think and also love what Councillor Mallet said about webcasting, standing committees, and CIC. All the good stuff happens there, so why not broadcast that? So I think that was everything. But again, thank you very much for your work.
Thank you, Councillor. Next would be Councillor Dara.
Thank you, Worship. Thank you for all the work that was gone into this project. I mean, it's a lot of work and a lot of data on that spreadsheet. So I'll get right to it. I was sold on the idea of environment having their own committee. I've thought about that in the past. However, I got to say, Councillor Rogers, she brought up some good points. So now I'm not quite as sold on it. I think would like to investigate that more about basically the avenue that she had put forward. Councillor Mallet, I have to agree with him 100% on the Wednesday thing. The whole reason why I'm not involved in finance and admin is because it's on a Wednesday. As someone who has 2 young children and who works shift work, and I don't use a sitter or some type of daycare, it's myself. Wednesday is a terrible day. I guess I can get on board though with the idea of having all of the committee meetings on a specific day. It does make scheduling a heck of a lot easier for a lot of people, especially people who do sit on other boards and stuff. So I like that idea. However, one question about that with the overflow on that 4th Thursday is if 3 of the 5 committees that month, or even the month before, all have overflow, how does that 4th Thursday work? So does that 4th Thursday, do the chairs or vice chairs of those 3 committees all have to be there for that 4th Thursday so they can go through the extra data and extra banter, or is it going to be a different Thursday and a different Thursday? The names, I'm sold on half the names and I'm not particularly fond of the other half. As Councillor Rogers had mentioned, and Councillor, I forget who else it was, one of the other ones, the community services and the development being changed, they sound great. The finance one is too many words. And I was struggling with mobility for transportation, and I was thinking to myself, there's got to be a better word. And then I started looking through across the country as to what the rest of the municipalities seem to call theirs, and they call all theirs transportation. And I thought to myself, well, we shouldn't just change something for the sake of change. And then I thought, well, why not? We can change something and not wait for everybody else, right? But I don't know if mobility is the right word for it, because I don't know if it really captures the essence of all of the issues, because of some of the things we deal with, for instance, snow clearing and plowing and road construction, things like that. So, or maybe I'm just maybe two small potatoes, I'm not sure. But there was something else and I forget what it was. So I'll leave it at that. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor McGarity.
Thank you, Worship. Well, I have a desertion here, but the good news is a lot of councils brought a lot of this material up. So I'm going, instead of talking an hour, I'll cut it down to about 3 minutes. So thanks for my fellow
so moved.
Okay. I thought you would like that. Look, let's start with the corporate sustainable infrastructure. I mean, I agree. That's sort of very pointed, inward focusing. You have to be involved type of handle. Finance administration was okay, but I look under that committee, and there's a lot to it, and I don't know if an hour is going to do it once a month. So maybe take the sustainable part of that and marry it up with environmental stewardship. When we talk about environmental stewardship, you're talking about sustaining the city. So there might be a few of the objects we can marry that up to. And I would say that public safety and mobility sort of walk hand in hand when you talk about moving people, and of course it's a public safety. So that might be something you can marry those two committees up, or half and half, I guess. Also too is the number of councillors on a committee. Look, there were sometimes we were struggling to get quorum. So when you get down to 6 and 4, I think if a councillor wants to be on a committee, if they want to be in 6 committees, fill your boots. It makes for better governance, I think. More people around saying better things, more people involved. It's always a good thing. I like the idea we have to keep the portal open for the community to access committees through their councillors. So, I mean, instead of staff bringing things in, which is very important, we also have to reserve that right for a councillor to bring stuff on committees. And that was sort of mentioned a few times here, I heard. So, also too, I like the idea of a staff liaison person. I don't know how that would work. But it's a thought that we should talk more about and see if we can do that. On the fact of reporting, I think it's not just the chair and vice chair, it's the committee members who sit down at the first of the year and decide, what priorities should be set. Maybe for the first 2 years, the 4 years, whatever. And, I think it should be up to the chair alone. It is working that councillors can bring things to the table. I think we should keep that. That's always great. It keeps people involved, and at least they have a say in the direction of the city. Also too, I think a lot of this work committees do should be recorded and put into part of our yearly report, which were mandated by the province now. So the standing committee should have part and parcel of that report included in a summary of the activities that took place over the years. And I don't think that would be a bad thing. To talk to Councillor Rogers' suggestion beyond standing committees, that's another big discussion. The subcommittees, what's out there, what are they doing? Are they being successful? Do we package them up? That's another, probably a secondary discussion, but since we're talking about committees, it's the logical next step. So, I agree with that. Other than that, that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Millet put his hand up again. We're allowed to speak. This is CIC more than once, but before, I'll just throw it out to Councillors Price and Peters. If you have any comment, feel free to put your hand up, and if not, I'll give 10 seconds to wait.
Your Worship, I think everyone has done a phenomenal job. There's not a whole lot left on my end to say. I've just been listening very patiently. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Councillor Price. And Councillor Millet.
I believe Councillor McDermott.
Oh.
Sure. I just got a couple of points.
He's playing cleanup. He's playing cleanup.
Just because it was brought up twice, and the liaison staff person, I believe we already do that. Like I worked 2 years with Dylan. I was meeting weekly. Now I work with Seabrook. I'm pretty sure I'm in his office at least once a day. And I know public safety works with Mr. Cameron, so I believe we already have that. It's not like the clerk's office just comes up with the agenda. I think that comes from the staff that's responsible for it, and right, the chair works with that staff. So I believe we already have that system in place. So I don't know what we're looking for extra. And then, well, you just give me 1 second. I got another point. Then there's the overflow that Councillor Darragh mentioned, that once we start getting in some of those meetings, if they go long, that's where I question the every same day and then 1 day for extra meetings. I'm just scared that we're going to end up that we'll need a lot of extra meetings, and those aren't planned, and then it becomes all over the place, where now we know that, right, the first Tuesday of the month is this, the right, second Thursday of the month is that one. So as much as it's all over the place, it's still planned, and I know when the meetings are, where if we go this route, and I understand why we might want to go, I'm scared that once we start needing extra meetings, that then it becomes all over the place. It's going to be real tough to schedule. It's going to be improvised. So I'm not sold on that point, and that just the overflow comment that Councillor Darragh kind of reinforced my thinking. So I'll just leave it at that. Oh, and just for the record, that Councillor Darragh said he agreed with me 100%. So.
Councillor Rogers, one final comment before we go to Councillor McDermott.
Sure. Thanks, Mr. Chair. It's actually not so much a comment. It was more a question. How often do we, I know we stay late sometimes, but how often do we really go over? Like my sense, like we don't have this extra meeting now and we figure it out. And I know that sometimes it means that we go over, but often that doesn't happen all the time. We currently don't have that extra meeting in place, and we've figured it out without it. So I think the idea that one is being recommended, I think one might be enough, would be my thinking.
And we could possibly be a little more judicious on some of the agenda items too, perhaps. Councillor McDermott, take us home.
Yeah, thanks. I mean, take it home. Look, as a number of other folks have done, thanks to all the staff members, Councillor Peters, in terms of the work that has gone into this and all the other stuff done on the governance committee. I'm going to keep my comments actually fairly brief, because it's been a really interesting conversation. I made some notes of, I guess, a couple of highlights that came out of it that I actually hadn't even really thought about. And one of them I would like to comment on right off the bat is this whole idea of broadcast in the standing committees as well as the CIC. In my recollection, this is probably the most engagement that anyone tuning into Rogers for a council meeting has ever seen. We don't do this. We don't do, and this is, to me, this is, you're absolutely right. This is where it happens. This is where the conversation happens. If our residents are really interested, and they are interested in the functions and what's going on at City Hall, every second Monday night at an open City Council meeting is not the place to get insight as to what's going on, because we've had that conversation. It started at standing committee. It's continued at CIC. A little bit might happen at a pre-council meeting, but ultimately by the time we get here, we've done that discussion, we've done the debate, we've done that. And I think this has been actually a really cool conversation tonight. It's been productive. A lot of really, really good points brought by all the councillors, stuff that I haven't considered, stuff that I have considered. There have been a lot of questions. I do not expect staff tonight to respond to any of those questions, because we'll be here again for a little bit longer, and all the power to residents who want to see such scintillating stuff. But I guess my takeaway from this is this has been a really good beginning of a conversation that's going to be iterative, and myself personally, in terms of when I think about my role within the governance committee and how and the work that we're doing on this, I think we'll have a pretty good conversation the next time we get together coming out of this. And I guess I've got some thoughts on that, and I'll leave it at that. I'll save it for coming back to the governance committee. I guess a couple of other little little points. I think one of the things that have been brought up was the whole idea of the environment and public safety split wasn't so much about creating two different committees today or even in the future, but really it was you had a meeting that was public safety. And then you had a meeting that was environment. And that the two, because they are really very different topics, and I agree, the environment side is really taking a lot of it's front and center in people's minds in the community and that sort of thing. Not to say public safety isn't. I mean, we all know that that's the case, but it wasn't the idea of creating a new standing committee. It was really about saying, let's actually be more targeted in how we set up our agendas. Wednesdays don't work. That's cool. Thursday, Tuesday. I don't know. I mean, that's a detail. And another thing is the names. I get it. No one likes the new name for finance and admin, amongst other things. And I think that's great. But really, we're talking about a name there, and we could do a focus group and probably get it settled within 15 minutes if the person doing it is efficient. I mentioned the broadcasting. I think honestly, that's to me, it's actually kind of a no-brainer, but it does involve, it's not as simple as flicking a switch. And to Kate's last point, one of the points I put down here was there's been comments about that extra, and I will say it's not the fourth Wednesday, it's the fifth Wednesday. I think that's the case, is it not?
No.
Was it fourth? Okay.
Yeah.
Was
It's the fourth Thursday.
Was how frequently do we really go over, and when we go over, how frequently do that in the course of the same month or week or anything like that? So, look, I'm going to leave it at that. Again, I think everyone have really thought about this. We've been talking about this for a long time. As long as I've been in council, really, we've been talking about the realignment, and this, to me, of that conversation, this is the first meaningful council conversation that we've had on it. I thought it was a really good meeting. There was a lot of really good information, and I look forward to seeing what the next steps are in this process. I will put one final sort of, and it's not a caveat. The terms of reference for this were very specific to the standing committees. So I can appreciate about the advisory committees that report to the different standing committees, how they fit into it. Perhaps it is appropriate to discuss that at this time, but I think it would really take a motion and a very well thought out conversation about why it's important at this point to include them in there to broaden the scope of that work. So with that, thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you, staff, for the presentation.
Thank you. Now, Councillor Chase, put your hand up for a second.
I did, but I would, my question is, I would like to get clarity on how we're proposing to proceed from here. I think that's something that we need to, come to some consensus on tonight.
I'll direct that towards Councillor McDermott or City Clerk.
Yeah, I mean, look, I pointed at Chris. Chris
Or
can follow
Chris
up.
McPherson. Yes.
Yeah, I pointed at Chris, and Chris can follow up if I don't get this 100% right. I think I mentioned that in my little in my statement there. There's a lot of information that has come in, and there are a lot of questions, and I think that they're legitimate questions, and I think this means coming back to the governance committee in a timely fashion and really distilling and thinking about the points that have been made and how they fit into that road going forward. My sense is we will meet within the short term, and out of that meeting, knowing how those meetings go, very efficient, will end up at least at some point of a way forward. And my sense would it would come back to council. I'm not going to set a date. I'll leave that to Chris from a judgment point of view in terms of staff resources and that sort of thing. But my hope would be that it would be sooner than later. So, Chris.
I agree 100%. It's an iterative process. It's an important one. I think there were I think there were some things we did agree on tonight, by and large, and there's a lot of things yet to figure out. But I think we're moving down the road to a conclusion. But it may take more than 1, 2, or 3 more. And I think and it really is good governance to make sure when you make that final call, everyone's satisfied that at least they were heard. And they do see something in the end result that was part of their input. So actually very impressed with the discussion this evening, and I look forward to the next time we get together.
Thank you, everybody. And is that Councillor Chase?
Just one thing. I just want to make it clear that I was frightened to death as a committee chair to go over the hour. and so anyway, I'll just make that point.
Okay.
There wouldn't be much coming from public safety to spill over to a Thursday.
Okay. I guess just a couple of comments. And again, any questions that I would have had have been raised here, so I won't duplicate them at all. But I will reiterate the fact that official translation or language aside, I don't know what the logistics and the legal issues are related to that, but broadcasting or webcasting our standing committees is something that we should really try to get done. I don't know what the implications are, even cost-wise. But one of the consistent concerns that people have raised to me over my quite a few years on council is that, to somebody's point, Councillor McDermott's point, every second Sunday or every second Monday, our formal council meeting, it's a show of hands, something gets passed, and there's not a lot of discussion, unless it's a very hot zoning issue. And people say, well, we don't know what you do and why have you done it? There's been no dialogue and it's never relayed to me. Well, we're getting a lot better at that with our strategic communications. But the fact is 99% of the work is done at the committee level. And when I tell some people that some issues have been debated for up to a year before we vote on it, where it's had public consultation, public presentations, expert input, staff input to a committee, back to staff again, back to a committee. And then it eventually gets fine-tuned to the point where it comes to CIC, where we debate it in public, and then we vote on it afterwards. And quite literally, by the time we vote on it, we've discussed this thing to death almost. And that doesn't mean that it's still not important. It's critically important. That's when we pass the bylaws or award tenders or contracts. But a lot of these things have been debated for a long time. So the public has to know that and have some confidence in the fact that those things, there's a robust debate around all these issues, but they're not seeing it if they're not tuned in to the committee structure. And so one of the processes we're doing here, obviously, is to fine tune what we're doing, the consistency, trying to get a consistency in dates so people know about it. And then if we can, at least the public knows that that dialogue is happening and they can participate if they wish, or they can sit back and listen. But the fact that decisions are made every second Monday without debate is not the fact at all. But it's a perception a lot of people have. So we got to dispel that. And that is a lot of work. I do know, like when this council came in 4 years ago, I did ask the committee chairs to do their best to try to set the priorities for each committee so that they align with our council priorities. And we hadn't done that before. So we made a good stab at it 4 years ago, got a good start, and we fine-tuned it a lot. And we're a lot better than where we were. But this is going to really take us home and help us really focus when we're talking at that strategic committee level, that they reflect what the priorities of the council are, and we're fine-tuning and we're fleshing them out to bring back recommendations to make this even a more vibrant, livable, safe, green city. So it's very important. So I really do appreciate, again, it's been said many times here, but thank you very much to the governance committee and Councillor McDermott and Peters, and our CAO Chris McPherson for his co-leadership on this. and to our city clerk, Jennifer and Michelle and Janice for the work engaging the council and bringing this back to us. So appreciate it very much. And there will be obviously another presentation with the next iteration when it's the time is right. And on that, this meeting is adjourned.
Oh, wait. No, not so much. Not adjourned for everyone. Not for everyone. This is Giselle. Wayne is not here.
Oh, yes.
I'm your unreasonable facsimile. So the media is asking if the mayor, Councillor Erickson, Michelle Cronin, and Chris, if you could stay behind. Did everybody hear me, Chris?
Yes.
Yes? Okay.
I'm going to stay right where I am.
Councillor McDermott, Councillor McGarity, Councillor Malay.
Good night, everyone.
Hi, Councillor.
Hey, Councillor Price.
I know.
Didn't even think
I know. And that's just one. Straight to the next line.
Yeah.
Tuesday, Thursday, Wednesday, Thursday, now, that whole thing with the broadcasting didn't even get
Just give us 2 minutes, Giselle and Steve and Phil. We'll be right with you.
Sure. Jennifer.
Yeah.
Oh, I just emailed you, or I'm about to.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, I will set up another governance meeting. I'll set it up. We'll set up really quickly.
That's a big sigh. Is that you, Stephen? Oh, no, it's Councillor Erickson sighing.
Sorry, that was me.
I was going to send you, I'm paranoid about chatting on this thing, but I was going to send you a chat saying how disappointed I was that you didn't have an actual background, unless 80s filing cabinet is a background that you've put on. For
No,
your
this
meeting.
is a law professor's office
Oh.
background. My computer blew up over the weekend, so.
Oh, no.
Yeah, apparently all this video conferencing was kind of hard on a 10-year-old video card, and yeah, $400 later, I'm still not out of the hole.
Oh, man.
Just moving. We're good to go.
Okay. Stephen, do you want to start? Who do you want to speak with first?
Perhaps I could start with a couple of technical questions. And probably it would best is Michelle here? Okay, if you can hear me, there's 5 monthly committees, maybe 6 if you split off environment, and you've got 4 Wednesdays. How are you going to hold 5 or 6 committee meetings on 4 Wednesdays?
Michelle, you're gonna have to go to a mic. So go to the lectern or somewhere else.
We did the math, and if you look at the current structure, based on it, they would be scheduled, every committee would have between 8 to 9, 9 or 10 meetings every year if you follow the calendar year. So it would be the same. Yeah.
So there wouldn't be one meeting every month for each committee. It would be like a rolling schedule a bit.
Right. It would be a rolling schedule that we set at the beginning of the year and set out. in a pre-existing schedule, and that every committee would still have approximately 8 to 10 meetings per year.
Okay, thank you. I understand. And can I check, is Councillor McDermott the chair of the governance committee?
He is, Stephen, along with me. It's Chris.
He's co-chair?
Co-chair.
Yeah, we co-chair the staff council committee up to this point. It's been a working committee. And one of the recommendations is it becomes a standing committee of council.
Okay, I understand. And maybe I can turn to the mayor now. And I ask, what's the main benefit to the public to this review and changes to the committee structure?
Well, as was mentioned tonight, Steve, we've been looking at this for several years, just trying to align, make sure that our standing committees are aligned with the city priorities as outlined in our municipal plan and our other master plans, so that the work that they do is focused on the overarching goals and objects of the municipal plan and the city. So that's number one. And the other one was that, just trying to make sure that looking at the dates, just like a bus schedule, we adjusted our bus routes a few years back that there's buses at the peak hours, and then after that, they're at, quarter after 1, quarter after 2, quarter after 3, so people know when they are. So trying to standardize that a bit so that people can get a little more confidence about when meetings are going to be happening, and it allows our staff also to promote them better with the schedule. So it's we're not inventing the wheel here. We're just trying to fine tune processes that we had, make sure that the committees are aligned strategically, so that the taxpayers know that we're focused on the city's priorities, and to make it a little bit easier for people to participate.
Okay, thank you. That's all my questions.
Philip, did you have any questions for Councillor Erickson or the mayor or Michelle on that? Philip?
Sorry, I had the classic. I pulled off the, did I unmute myself? And yes, I did. So
you're the broadcaster. You're the broadcaster. We expect that from Llewellyn, not from you. Anyway, go on.
One of the things I was just about to say was if Michelle could move a little bit closer to the mic, just because it's for radio, but I guess I should have had my mic on for that. Could you just this is for radio, so could you just go over briefly kind of what the changes are that we're looking at here?
Chris McPherson? Michelle?
Okay, so there were 5 recommendations. The first one was changing the name of the Strategic and External Relations to a Governance and Civic Engagement Standing Committee that would meet 4 years to assist councils with its vision and reporting to a spot for reporting of our standing committees. The second was the committee names would be changed to reflect our current programs. We are aligned with 8 services and programs. The third one was we would change it to a minimum of 6 councillors appointed to each committee with a quorum of 4 members. The standing committees would occur every Wednesday, and on the 4th Thursday of each month, any overflow would be discussed from those standing committees. And the last, number 6, was of course approving this with an amendment to A19 bylaw on January 1st, 2021, with the exception of the governance and civic engagement. We would begin in the fall.
And when did you start working on looking at these changes?
The governance committee was struck in 2019, and we were asked to look at a host of different governance issues such as code of conduct. But standing committees were one on our list to look at, and the idea we would look at it prior to the next municipal election. So we've been at it a little while, and we still got lots to do. And in terms of tonight, council had a good discussion. I think we got some good direction from council on certain items. Other items we need to come back and have more discussion, and that's the intent right now.
So yeah, what's the next part of this process? Just more discussion?
Yeah, it is. We're looking at that. This is going to be an iterative process to get it right. It's a big part of our governance. It's probably worthy of having plenty of discussion. And it is something we've tried to change over a number of years, and it can sometimes be difficult, but I think that's why it deserves a good discussion, a good hearing, and get to a point where the majority of council are satisfied with this part of our governance structure.
Why does this need to be looked at? Why is this important?
Council in the past has expressed interest in having the standing committees reflect more of what's going on in our current environment, such as the environment, that times do change, and our committees should change with them. And the committees are supposed to deal with services related to specific parts of the organization and the community. And as the community changes, we need to change their governance with it.
And now to Councillor Erickson. You had a few comments after the presentation. Maybe just briefly, kind of what would you like to see in the next discussion? What kind of changes do you think need to be made to these changes?
Excellent question, Philip. I think there's some minor tinkering that needs to be done, in my opinion, to some of the concrete suggestions. And I think the one that resonated most with my council colleagues was the name of the Finance and Administration Committee, currently changing to Corporate and Sustainable Infrastructure. I think I heard clearly from most of my council colleagues that that made the name more obscure, not more plain, and therefore better able to engage the public with the subject matter that it refers to. But that got at one of my other criticisms, which is I think the governance committee has made an error in assuming that what are they called? The program results areas should determine what our standing committee system looks like. To me, that's putting the cart in front of the horse. The program results area, in my opinion, are ways that the standing committee mandate is administered. So the standing committees need to have a broader mandate with more descriptive language and a capacity to kind of engage unknown elements in our community or unknown challenges that the future might hold. So, there needs to be some reworking in that regard. And I was also fairly critical of the scope of the project insofar as that it didn't really consider all of the work that councillors do on the other committees and other roles they serve inside the city. I understand how difficult it can be to analyze everything at once, but there should have been some accommodation to the lived realities that councillors face, and not just pretend that we can look at the standing committee piece in isolation. And I think Councillor Rogers brought up a very good example of this critique by saying that choosing Wednesdays means that you exclude parents in an important way, because that's a very busy day in the life of a parent that has children in the K-12 system.
Just lastly, on the committee names, what difference does it make to change any of these names anyway? Why is that something that's being done?
Well, in my opinion, the desire to change the names, is the same as the desire to look to continuously improve our standing committee system. It's to create a system of municipal governance that's more engaging for the citizens, more reflective of their values and what we can do as a city. And having a standing committee system where the names, easily respond in our constituents' minds to their subject matter areas helps with that engagement. So when, for example, if I'm talking about finance and administration things, people would assume that that's, budgets, that would be maybe, how personnel are paid and hired inside the city, those kind of things. which is why, in my opinion, naming the committee, I'm having a hard time even remembering it, corporate and sustainable infrastructure, kind of misses the point, because I'm not sure members of the public would correlate corporate and sustainable infrastructure with our annual budget process, our employees' pension funds, our HR policies, and then the long-term, some of the things easily flow from it, like the long-term financial plan and infrastructure planning and stuff. But the work of the Finance and Administration Committee is larger than just corporate and sustainable infrastructure pieces. And the word corporate has a lot of baggage around it too. There are not a lot of people that think that corporate's the best description of the municipal government as an entity.
All right, that's all I had on that subject.
Okay, thanks. Phil, you wanted to speak to Chris McPherson on another topic on, I believe, preparedness for a possible second wave, or for a second wave of COVID. So I guess just before we leave, is everyone, you got what you needed from the committee discussion? Steve, Phil, yes? Okay.
Yep. I'm good.
Thank you. All right. Okay, so Phil, I think Chris is still here, so you can go ahead and ask your questions if you like.
Okay, I'm signing off.
Thanks, Councillor Erickson.
Adios.
Go ahead, Phil.
Chris, yeah, just as we're getting closer to fall here, and tomorrow's the first day of September, how is the city preparing for a potential second wave of COVID-19?
Well, so I'm part of as all CAOs in the province are part of a provincial network with the Provincial Office of Public Safety and EMO to get our daily briefings. The province is planning if there is a second wave. So I guess we have regular communications with them. We take our lead from them. And in terms of our city operations, right now we're looking at if there's a second wave, how does it impact our ability to provide service? So, what if our staff members get infected? What measures can we take in place? So I think we're trying to be proactive, getting ready, hoping for the best, but preparing for the worst. I guess, we're all anxious about the start of school and universities and how that may impact our communities. And but the experts right now are with the province, and they're helping all municipalities out with our plans. So we do have operational plans, and we have discussions about what if scenarios. And, like any good planning exercise, we again try to prepare for what we hope doesn't happen.
What did you learn from the start of this pandemic that you're going to apply if there is a second wave? What would you do differently, or is there anything you'd do differently?
We did a number of things. In our police departments and our fire departments, we split shifts so that we didn't have cross-contamination. People worked in groups and they stayed in their groups. And that was one thing we did, was just changing shifts and how people work together. Obviously, like most organizations, we had a lot of people working remotely and found that we could be productive in that way by not having people in our buildings. We also had to abide by all the social distancing, mask and hygiene rules, and still provide service because most of our services were considered essential, such as working on our roads, our water and sewer, our sewage services. They all had to continue. And in some cases, we've had staff that normally would have to work very close together. So we had to improvise to find ways to still deliver those services, but keep our staff and the public safe. So we can retreat to those if the province changes the phasing based on the number of cases, and we'd almost go back in a phased approach back to the way, hopefully not the way it was in March and April, but certainly we can change the way we do business quickly now because we've done it in the past.
So that was the plan then. Has there been any change? Like, would you pretty much just go back to all those things you just mentioned, or is there anything you thought, oh, this didn't work as well, maybe we'll try it differently?
Well, one thing we found that could work is remote working. We are trying to get a lot of people back into our buildings, but there will be a certain amount that will be able to work from home productively, and that will probably continue for the foreseeable future. Again, it just keeps the number of people in our buildings down somewhat. In terms of what we see out in the public, you'll still see city staff with masks and social distancing, doing all the things we're all supposed to be doing. And I can't speak to too many things that didn't work well. They seem to work very well, actually. And I think we learned a lot. And we did look at it as a bit of an opportunity to actually see if we could deliver business differently, and tried to learn from that. And so we're trying to keep the best parts of it, such as remote working for some people, and keeping shifts separated where possible. And we'll continue with that. And hopefully, excuse me, get through to whatever the end of this pandemic, whatever that will be.
Now, I don't know if this is under your wing, so feel free to point me in the right direction otherwise. But one of the adjustments the city did make for restaurants was having those opportunities for places for people to sit outside. So you could get your meal at one restaurant and then go sit at a picnic table outside. Is there any plans, given that the weather is getting a little bit colder now and that might not be possible for that much longer?
Well, we're certainly keeping an eye on it. We'd like to keep them going as long as possible. People still seem to enjoy them and are using them. It was part of our exercise of local business community. Obviously, the hospitality industry has been hit very hard. And we thought it was one of the few things we could do with the business community to at least encourage people to do takeout and eat out as much as they can. When you talk about some things that we put in place during the pandemic that we may retain, actually, these things seem to be quite popular, and maybe some of these things will continue even when we do get back to normal. In terms of the weather, we'll keep an eye on it. I know it's been cooler the last few days. Off in September, though, it does heat up again. So I guess we'll do the best we can to keep them out as long as possible, as long as it's comfortable for people to use.
And you mentioned earlier the police and fire department kind of staggering their shifts to prevent any sort of contamination. Is that still happening now?
The police, it was not possible. As you know, we had 2 homicides, and we needed everyone back at work, and so it was not possible to continue with that. If I'd have to leave it to the chief whether or not we'd ever go back to that. In terms of fire, we did have a satellite station at the public library, so we could separate out our crews a bit more. That has since ceased, and those crews are back into the regular stations. But of course, they're in platoon, so they're in with the same group of people they normally work with, and that's important that we do not try to transfer people around to different shifts. And again, I think it would be more for the fire chief to speak whether or not he's able to continue to do that.
Fair enough. How do you decide if it is time to go back to all those different precautions you mentioned before? Does that come from the province, or do you make that call at the city level?
No, we rely on the province of New Brunswick. The chief medical officer of health, we're in regular communications with them. They help us with all our operational plans for all our facilities that we operate, and also WorkSafe New Brunswick. So we follow provincial lead.
All right, thanks, Chris. I appreciate that.
Okay, Phil, no problem.
Okay, if that's everything, let's all go home. Well, I'm already home, but we'll say goodnight.